Yes, it's on. Well, it's 7:30 and our guests are ready for us. This evening it's my pleasure to introduce Amy Riding and Patrick Cianella. They are the husband-wife team of double play, flute, and tuba. It's an unusual but very fascinating combination of instruments. Amy, the flutist, is a graduate of Oberlin Conservatory. Patrick, the tubaist, obviously, holds both a bachelor's and a master's from Eastman School of Music. They've been performing together for 36 years, and they, when not traveling to perform, live near Detroit, Michigan. So please join me in welcoming this duo.
Thank you so much for joining us for The Art of Music, our theme for our touring program this year. Part of the art of programming well, especially when you're a flute and tuba duo, we believe, is to start with something people recognize. At least we hope you recognized My Wild Irish Rose, composed by a Buffalo native, Chauncey Alcott, in 1926. Because of that song and When Irish Eyes Are Smiling and other such similar tunes, posthumously he was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Another Irish persona, but this one truly Irish, born in Belfast, Ireland, James Galway, a world-renowned flute player, who had a career in very fine symphony orchestras, such as the London Phil and the Berlin Philharmonic, ultimately. But in the mid-1970s, he decided to try a solo career and incorporate some of his own unique personality traits, shall we say. An incredible virtuoso. Perhaps you've seen Mr. Galway on television or in concert. Heard him, I should say, more importantly than having seen him. And, you know, he might be playing something very classical, and then the next number would be he'd whip out his Irish tin whistle and play a little jig. We take you to an arrangement that Galway produced a number of years ago of a Baroque piece, a piece written way back in the early 1700s, little known composer for most of us, Johann Adolf Hasse. He was known during his day as being a very nice songwriter, and more specifically an opera composer, but he had the occasional instrumental that he produced, and Galway came across this one and decided it just was too lively and wonderful to let go. So he arranged it for himself, and now you hear our rearrangement of an arrangement of Tambourine by Johann Adolf Hasse.
Our next style of music is ragtime, a genre that was very popular with the youth of 1890. That was the hot style to dance to that your parents hated. It had syncopation, a raggedy rhythm that the older people just didn't understand the appeal of. The first music in this country that had black and white performers playing it together, apart, working with each other, collaborating. It was quite the industry. The king of ragtime was Scott Joplin, and we've played him in this hall many times. Tonight, he is a part of the story of our selection by Joseph Lamb. See, it's 1915. Scott's at the end of his career, and he's the only ragtime composer left that the publishing houses still pay to publish his music. They still give him money because they know that it will sell. He's the king of ragtime. And Joseph Lamb is just a businessman who liked to play piano at night to relax. He happened to have written a couple of ragtime pieces and mentioned it to Joplin on the street one day in New York. Scott, being a very kind man, said, "Well, why don't you come over sometime and play them? I'd love to hear them." And Joseph Lamb did. And so here's a combination of a white, fairly affluent business owner going to a black man's house in New York City and playing on his piano, and the black man says, "I can help you get published." It's a rarity in 1915. and he was good to his word. As 110 years later, a flute and tuba duo here in your community can perform Reindeer Rag by Joseph Lamb. And by all the Christmas decorations that you've hung in your area now, not you personally, but the stores, etc., I guess we're right on time with this Reindeer Rag.
Our next musician is not a strange name to those who love opera or symphonic music, piano music, string music. Yes, just about every ensemble you can conceive of. Mozart would write at least one selection for that combination or solo instrument. Certainly, he wrote a beautiful flute concerto, a flute and harp concerto. Sadly, nothing for the tuba, but it hadn't been invented yet, so we'll forgive him. Born in 1756, by the time he was 6 years of age, his parents decided or realized they had a Wunderkind on their hands. And his older sister, Nannerl, who was all of 10, also very gifted. So why not take those two youngsters on a bit of a tour, see where they could get them in, to be heard, to help them along their way, and particularly Wolfgang, of course, it being the era that it was in history. That tour lasted 3 years, so Mozart was not even quite 10 by the time they returned home, and already had been polishing up his performance skills. I think they came quite naturally to him. I think he was probably always a great entertainer and always a bit precocious, because when you are a genius, as he was, when do you really have time to grow up, right? You're either composing or entertaining, performing, so you don't think too much about your maturity level. But no doubt his music was the most sophisticated of the era. A bit of fun he had one night in 1778. He's 22 years of age now, very seasoned performer. All of Europe knows him, so when they know he's going to be there, they come no matter where. He's in Paris in this particular evening, and he's doing his typical thing, I'm sure, performing many of his works that people know. Occasionally, people would, at Mozart's concerts, ask him to play something that they knew, and most of the time he could do it. But he turns the table on them a little bit and surprises them with a very popular song that time all throughout Europe. In English, the title would be something like, "Oh, Shall I Tell You, Mama?" And so he plays that little tune, and the audience is fully charmed and then amazed. As per usual, Mozart can't just leave it alone. He begins to improvise on that tune, ultimately creating 12 variations. You might be wondering if you would know this little tune. I keep calling it a little tune because there's a reference to something small in the version that we in our country sing to match up with this tune, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." That melody is the very same one based on that French folk tune from 1761. Nowadays, when pianists present this work of Mozart's, because finally he did write it down for us lowly earthlings so that we could read it later, pianists are about to perform this say, "And now I present Mozart's Twinkle Variations." We'll give you the theme and 4 of those 12 variations. Music from Mozart.
This evening marks the 7th night that we've been on the road. We left on Tuesday of last week, our home in Farmington Hills, Michigan, and performed in Pittsburgh that afternoon for a Veterans Day show. Wednesday, we were in the greater Philadelphia area, as well as Thursday. And Friday, we were in Amish country in Quarryville, Pennsylvania. Saturday, Baltimore, Maryland, and Columbia, Maryland. And yesterday, Rockville for 2 shows. We're with you good folks tonight after playing in Fredericksburg on the way down here. We'll be in the area 3 more days, a couple performances in this area tomorrow, and Williamsburg on Wednesday, and then Midlothian on Thursday, before heading back to Michigan on Friday for Saturday concerts. So we're busy at Double Play, and we'll continue with a very busy composers in this popular song set. The first very busy musician was no other than Duke Ellington, who's from Washington, D.C., my home city, and he left that rather small city to go to the big city, New York City, and he would work with 9 other musicians. They formed a band with Ellington at the piano, and they're probably should be considered the first modern big band. And they had quite the run at a club in New York called the Cotton Club. It drew all types of gentlemen from all types of life. Republicans, Democrats, FBI men, gangsters. And why were all these seemingly, rivals together? Well, it was alcohol, of course. It was prohibition. And they could drink a little bit and dance a lot with Duke Ellington's music. Ellington composed a lot in the Cotton Club days. One night after finishing a chart, when coming to title it, he thought of the saying Bubber Miley, his trumpet player, would always say, "Don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing." We follow that 1931 classic jazz standard with 1947, the first Broadway show by Lerner and Loewe. They would go on in 1956 with My Fair Lady and in 1960 with Camelot, giving them one of the most illustrious careers on Broadway as a team. Lerner and Loewe's first show from 1947, Brigadoon, and the beautiful love song, It's Almost Like Being in Love.
This next song predates all of us in that it's been around for over 100 years, but it continues to be familiar for most people and for most generations, which kind of surprises me. It's the deceptively simple song called I'm Just Wild About Harry. 1921, the Broadway show Shuffle Along debuted, and I'm Just Wild About Harry was one of the compelling songs in that show. U.B. Blake, the composer, born in 1887 in Baltimore, not terribly far from here, and it was historically recorded as perhaps, most likely, the first successful all black casted, produced, directed Broadway show. Who knows what those folks thought when they came together with this project in mind, but it was a smash. Everyone loved it. And still to this day, you hear I'm Just Wild About Harry, especially, when the male half of a couple is named Harry. There's a lot of jibing about that. We overhear that sometimes. We follow that up with, speaking of jibing, a wonderful song called A Fine Romance, just one of some 700 musical numbers from Jerome Kern. Mr. Kern did write primarily for the theater, for the stage, but occasionally a song of his would debut, be heard for the first time in a film. And that's the case with A Fine Romance. The film, Swing Time, goes all the way back to 1936, but as it's a Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers favorite for those who are fans, you can catch it still rather frequently on cable television. And yes, it would be those two that are singing A Fine Romance with some pretty biting satirical remarks such as, "You're colder than the fish in the Arctic Ocean. At least they flap their fins to express emotion." And then we close this set of some wonderful older popular songs with Irving Berlin, born in 1888, small hamlet in Russia. That's rather redundant, isn't it? If it's a hamlet, it's small in Russia, but came to the States so young that he has almost no recollection of that time. He was about 5 when his family landed in New York. And over time, he would receive so much recognition: the Army Medal of Merit for his service while stationed in upstate New York, a Congressional Medal from President Eisenhower for his contribution to patriotic song. But here's the other side, I remind you, as if you needed reminding, of Irving Berlin, and that would be just wonderful songs that were reflective of his observations. In 1929, for example, Mr. Berlin noticed that the young people of Harlem were really starting to dress up and get all dolled up, and go out on the town. And you remember what we used to call that, putting on the Ritz? Well, that's the origins of that song, that recognition of Irving Berlin's. 3 more popular songs.
Amy and I have been together.
Check, check. There we go. Maybe.
Amy and I have been together performing for 36 years. We met 37 years ago. We both were musicians. Amy and I met in 1988 and started dating in 1989. We both were professional musicians out in Phoenix, Arizona. And, well, we started dating, played duets as fun, and soon we gave a private performance in which about 40 people came to it, including the violinist in the Glenn Campbell band. And they were very complimentary and suggested we continue. And with their help, we started receiving job offers just to play as a flute and tuba. And the rest is history. And we've been coming to Richmond for 30 years plus now and always enjoy our time here. We found that one of the most popular styles of music to arrange is the waltz. Last year, in 2024, the most popular waltz to dance to in Poland was written by a Russian composer in 1956, Dmitri Shostakovich. Shostakovich, whose musical career began shortly after World War I with the resumption of piano competitions throughout Europe. Being Russian, he first won a few in Russia and then did some international competitions in which he took first place. And with that and concertizing all over Europe, the release of his Symphony No. 1 by 1920, Dmitri Shostakovich became quite an international success in music. In 1956, he writes a suite for variety orchestra. And if you're inclined to like to know things about music, you may never have heard that term, variety orchestra. Well, because he was trying to hide the fact that he, Shostakovich, a Russian, was trying to utilize American jazz techniques in an orchestral work. It would be fine other than the fact that Stalin, the dictator of the time in Russia, did not like American jazz. So labeling it variety orchestra gave Shostakovich an out, nothing to explain here. And after all of that, the government loved the work so much they used it in a propaganda movie. So there's that. We just like it because it was the most popular instrumental last year in Poland to dance to as a new couple on your reception day. Waltz number 2, 1956 by Dmitri Shostakovich.
Well, Thanksgiving is certainly sneaking up on us all pretty quickly. But with that in mind, as we left for this trip, we decided to make a little switcheroo in our program and eliminate one of the pieces that we've been playing and incorporating some Thanksgiving hymns. May or may not be particular to Thanksgiving in your recollection, but two of the three I know I have sung at services around Thanksgiving time. And then we added one that speaks to really what Thanksgiving is all about, is gratitude for those basic things that we take for granted the rest of the time when we're not thinking about them, right? The simple things in life. Put so eloquently by the Shakers, in particular, Elder Joseph Brackett in 1858 with his song and dance, Simple Gifts. And what a masterful work it became in the hands later, nearly 100 years later, in 1944, with the brilliant Aaron Copland and his Appalachian Spring. That might be a piece you're familiar with in the classical world. After Simple Gifts, we turn to the Netherlands for a beautiful hymn, very serene, points to a verse in Romans, if God is for us, who could be against us? But the hymn is simply, we gather together text from Theodore Baker. And finally, we finish with a Welsh melody, commonly referred to amongst musicians, organists in particular, Ash Grove. It's a tune that works with many a hymn, but for this time of year, it's especially popular when one sings, "For All Things Now Living." Text from Catherine Davis in 1892, and again, Welsh in origin. 3 songs or hymns of thanksgiving.
So nice to be with a grateful people. Thank you. We continue with a celebration of George Gershwin's opera Porgy and Bess, celebrating 90 years. Gershwin, who really a lot like Mozart, they both were incredible performers at a young age. Gershwin, at age 15, held down 2 musical positions. First off, during the day, he was a song plugger. I remind you, this is the days where radios were not in the home yet, where more Americans knew how to read music than didn't, and the piano was very popular in many homes. And so publishing houses sold piano music, and Gershwin was in back of his piano, ready to play any customer who came in and put a piece of sheet music offered by the publishing house in front of him and say, "I want to know how it goes before I buy it." So he did that 8 hours a day as a 15-year-old, and at night he recorded a lot of times in New Jersey, he being in New York City. And when I say record, I mean piano rolls. these little discs would be inserted into pianos that weren't really pianos, they were piano players. They were the first way to hear a recording before modern recording. So now it's 1930s, and Gershwin is an international star, both in the concert hall, Broadway stage, and movie theaters. But he hasn't written opera, and he's about the same age as Mozart. Mozart, who died at 35, and Gershwin's starting to get close to 35, and he hadn't written any operas. Mozart wrote 10. And so Gershwin finds a story to set the music, that of the novel from Du Bois Hayward, 1928, called Porgy. And then that was turned into a play that was very successful. So Gershwin had this idea to set it to music, and he sure did it well. From that opera, we perform Best You Is My Woman Now, I Loves You Porgy, reverse that, I Loves You Porgy, and then Best You Is My Woman Now. And then we followed up with It Ain't Necessarily So, sung by the character Sportin' Life from the novel. Sportin' Life is a drug dealer, and he justifies his behavior with that song. It ain't necessarily so. The opera begins with such a blending of cultures, the operatic aria with the gospel sound of the South, in particular the Southern blacks, and the blending of it into a glorious sound known as Summertime. That opens the opera. And finally, we'll finish off the set with I've Got Plenty of Nothing, sung by Porgy, who makes his own social commentary quietly. He is, in the story, a handicapped individual, physically disabled. He either has legs and can't use them, or he has no legs at all, depending on the presentation you're watching. Music by Gershwin, 90 Years, Porgy and Bess.
So before we play our closing number, which, in case you're wondering, is a Sousa march, just a little clarity for those who are curious, because you have such a good view of our instruments in this hall, I'm certain. You might be questioning, really, is that a tuba? I thought they were a lot bigger. What about those marching tubas? And it is confusing because tuba is an overarching name for really a family of different sizes of instruments you can call a tuba. Basically, this tuba that Patrick is playing could cover the range of that sousaphone, the one that wraps around. It's just shaped differently. And the bell is facing upward rather than forward, as you would need in a marching band, right, to have the sound hit the crowd as you go marching